the most challenging months in our history. But notwithstanding that, what we've seen during February is activity coming back in line and below seasonal trends, and that's given us an opportunity for some respite and some opportunities for reset and recovery. It's worth recognising that within the context of everything that's been going on during those extremely busy months, we've still made progress in the background on a number of key elements of the organisation's state infrastructure and workforce development plans in order to continue to drive the improvements required in kind of the foundational work in the organisation. In the report, there's an update on the work that we've been doing in the strategic planning workforce group, where we've just seen circa 80 new assistant ambulance practitioners. We've also, as I've mentioned in the action, overseen a restructure of integrated patient care, recruited the director, but also now recruited a substantive team. The work that we're doing now, as we've come out of that extremely busy period, is to ensure that we support our colleagues across the organisation in relation to annual appraisals and making sure that we are conducting those during what is a relatively quieter period. And in the background, we've also been driving the digital transformation of the organisation with the use of the electronic patient care records now up to 80%, I think we hit at the end of last week. And this week we'll see further developments in that space with the use of the NHS number. We have also continued to make progress on information security and progress against the data security and protection toolkit. And we continue to drive, albeit we have some 2 or 3 days remaining, the delivery against our incredibly ambitious capital plan. The rest of the report obviously goes into a level of detail, but I'm happy if I pause there, perhaps take questions on the content as opposed to going through each element in detail.
That's helpful, Kadir. Thank you. So questions, Amit.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report, Kadir. You talk on page 6 about the working with NHS England and system partners to develop a London-wide plan for cohorting at emergency departments. And we know that, as your report pulls out, that hospital handover delays were a significant impact on us during the second COVID wave. Could you just say a bit more about those discussions, how they're progressing, and whether there's anything the board can do to support those discussions?
Thank you, Amit. It's a really key point, really, in both our experience during the wave 2 and in terms of securing our resilience going forward. So it's absolutely key that we make some progress and secure a pan-London position on this. We've been working with NHS England colleagues in developing a pan-London approach, and we have got a draft document that we are looking to agree pan-London sign-up to. I think it's fair to say there's some apprehension in relation to that cohorting document, and that really comes from the competing tensions or priorities across the system, because with cohorting comes potential implications in relation to social distancing and avoiding any nosocomial spread of COVID within emergency departments. So we're working through that, and a key milestone, I suppose, or key piece of progress that we've made is in the after action reviews that we've been doing with NHS England in terms of lessons learned. So they've been done within organisations, but are also being done at a system level. And I know Mark chaired our 111 after action review, but we also had a 999 after action review And through both of those, agreeing an approach for any future waves around handover, minimising handover delays, and potentially delivering a cohorting policy are key. I suppose I'm in roundabout terms saying we haven't landed the policy yet. It's a very live discussion with everybody very clear about the impact of not having a policy. But there's some further work to do with NHS England colleagues and the wider system to secure clinical ownership and buy-in to a collective approach that everybody feels comfortable with, and everybody feels meets their own organisational priorities and how they best look after their patients. I wonder whether it's worth asking Chair Heather, asking Fenella, if there's anything to comment further on that.
Hold on, yes, in a moment. Let's take Karim's question.
Thank you. And I think, obviously appreciate how extraordinarily busy and how much work went in over the course of the last wave of the pandemic. I mean, obviously, looking at response times, just crudely, we went into the red across the board in December and January. And, especially I think for the Cat2 patients, there were response times which, we would much rather have done better on. And that was incorporating learning that we'd had from wave 1. So, with potential third waves on the way, stroke new pandemics, I guess my two questions are, what level of capacity are we now building within our day-to-day operations to, what's changed in our day-to-day capacity to build daily resilience into this, and what's the learning for a surge in the future in terms of, getting ahead of the curve, if you like.
Okay, so I'm just doing, Ronald, is your question in a similar vein? Let's just group them all together and then answer.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, very comprehensive report, Kadir, so thanks for that. It is in a similar vein, my question. It's in the context, actually, of our workforce plans, and actually it relates to resilience. So we've got very ambitious plans, and I just noted that on the BAF later, our strategic recruitment and retention risk remains high at 16. So in the context of building resilience, how are we going to achieve what I think the People and Culture Committee have noted as quite ambitious plans? So where are we going to find these 269 international paramedics, for example?
Okay, so before you answer, I just wanted to add in, and I think it's linking Fenella in. So apart from having cohorting, clearly it has to be in the context of new models of care, the hospital at home that we heard about at our board development day, and we knew about 3,000 across London. So we need to be making sure that in any pandemic, those sort of, it's normalised anyway, but should reduce the hospital queuing, because not so many people should be getting that far to the hospital. So I just wonder if Fenella wants to answer that bit before you come back and talk about the resilience, what the resilience is, and the manpower issue. Fenella, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So as you've just mentioned, a lot of the work that's going on clinically is around how we can make sure that the right patients are being taken to the emergency departments. Mm-hmm. And that is year long. It's not something we should be stepping up and stepping down. So work that is ongoing, and where we need to continue to work with the system, is to ensure that LAS clinicians have direct access to urgent treatment centres and to all of the pathways that are afforded to integrated urgent care and to GPs.
And that is one of the national priorities.
Surveying. Mm-hmm. We need to finalise and embed the same-day emergency care access for cohorts of patients, which Kadir and the team are modelling to look at the impact that will have. We also need to do a piece of work, and I've been asked to go as a result of the after-action review that Kadir has just mentioned, to the Emergency Care System Leaders Group to talk about how we continue to work on this. but it's wider than that. It's around the hospitals pulling patients through from the emergency department, because the biggest problem in the emergency department is exit block.
Yes.
It's not the inflow at the front door, it's getting patients into the hospital. And with the reduction of footprint in the emergency departments, which is being quantified at the moment, we need to ensure that the hospitals don't get that the emergency departments don't get overcrowded. And the emergency departments end up as being the sort of middle of the sandwich. We're bringing people in, the hospitals have got patients in beds, and we've got to be able to ensure the patients who are going to emergency departments are those that are going to benefit from emergency care, and those patients who don't need emergency care are benefiting from care closer to home.
But I think the fact that, you know, the national priorities include the front end part of that is a big development and really good to see. I wonder if we could pick up on the manpower and the resilience in the people and culture section. Would that work for people? Because I think it's very much part of that. Not losing Karim or Rommel's questions. Is that okay? Will you still be with us, Kadir? I know you've got to opt in and out a bit. Will you be here for that section? Okay, thank you very much. So, well done, and noting all the work, but knowing that we could have more to come. Thank you. So, integrated performance report. Lorraine, are you starting off with this? Who is starting off?
Thanks, Heather. I think it's really just there for information and just to note that this is what the director's report will be referencing and then updating on changes since.
I mean, the issue we've got is January data, isn't it? And of course, we're March now, so life moves on. So are there any questions that arise in this report that don't come up elsewhere?
No, really, Heather,
I think they're covered in the director report.
The approach is really that the director reports cover the ground.
Perfect.
It's there for background supporting information.
Okay. Well, in that background supporting information, clearly we pick up on violence, staff absence, and health and safety issues and training. So we might want to return to those when we look at this subsets. Yep. Okay, so I think that takes us then, John, to your first report. A bit of a tall order that you weren't actually here for the period. But John, what would you like to share with us?
Thank you, and I want to say thank you for the welcome into LAS. It's been good to arrive, and it's been great to be welcome. I have managed to get around the patch, so I've listened to calls in Waterloo, Bow, and in our 111 services in Barking and Croydon, and I've done a clinical shift at Oval, and I spent yesterday in Ilford, which might be useful for subsequent agenda items.
It would be.
In terms of the report, as you say, it covers the January. And of note are the number of incidents that are reported during that period, significant increase. If you turn to the integrated performance report, you'll find them on page 8, and you can see where we've got those longer delays. We're doing a subject judgment review on each of those, and 150 incidents have been picked, hoping to present back on that at the end of April. So we will have reviewed those long
and
delays.
that links to what Karim was really saying, that although we did well on category 1, we would like to do better on category 2, and that's our assurance of looking at those through the quality committee. So that's really important. Thank you. Keep going.
In terms of observations from me, then, it does show a strong reporting culture within LAS, which is of note as I've been out and about across the last month. You can see we've got the quarter-3 thematic analysis within this report. 5 related to cardiac arrest, 2 for delayed defibrillation, 3 other ones related to cardiac arrest, and then conveyance decisions. Important to note, we've added a comment around that although they make up a number of our significant or serious incidents for conveyance, actually by far the majority of our conveyance decisions are very safe, and we do lots of non-conveyance, which does relate back to what we just said about not taking patients to hospital where they don't need to. We go live with the Patient Safety Incident Response Framework on the 1st of April, previously signed off by this board in January, so we look forward to that. And only other part to note is that the quality account priorities will be coming back in May once we've done a review following a conversation we had at the board subcommittee. They're highlights from me.
No, thank you, John. And I just wonder, do we have more to do with the Patients Forum about non-conveyance? Because I think the public, or maybe I'm wrong, but I think the public still think you've got a problem, you call an ambulance and you go to hospital, whereas that isn't the current not necessarily the right answer. Is that something we should be putting to the Patients' Council? Some work, possibly?
They're just coming in there. I think that would be helpful to maybe have that conversation. Maybe have it in the context of the strategy that we adopted as a trust back in 2018, which envisaged a 50% conveyance rate, which is, of course, something we're now achieving consistently across the trust. And by extension, doing something to raise public awareness.
So could I ask that you, one of you, talks to Anthony about getting that on the agenda for the Patient to Public Forum? Yep. That'd be helpful. Thank you. Yes, any questions for John? Well done for getting out and about in this restricted time so quickly, John. It's really good to hear. Any questions? Rommel, sorry, you got your hand up, yes?
Thanks, Chair. There might be an unfair question, John, and apologies, but I was just interested in your fresh pair of eyes as you picked up the two new teams, the 999 Quality Governance and the Continuous Improvement team. What were you seeing as opportunities to, increase efficiency and productivity across both the 999 and the 111 service, if any, at this point in time?
Yeah, so the title is Quality and Continuous Improvement, and primarily those teams work on auditing the calls. There's very strict regimes, both within our AMPDS, which is what we use within the 999 service, and within NHS Pathways, which we use in 111. So that team primarily focuses on audit, but once they've done the audits of those clinicians and those call handlers, they then feed back, and that's where you get the continuous improvement. So I think there will be opportunities to come, Rommel, around how do we move that forward? But at the moment, those teams are very much focused on that. You'll note that call handling does come up quite a number of times in our series since the reporting, and it is within our framework that we start on the 1st of April. So we have got further work to keep doing on call handling, but they do monitor, they do very well at monitoring our call handlers, and this is a difficult period of time. You only get a few minutes with each patient to get that information. So I think there is opportunity, but at the moment it's very much focused on meeting the licensing requirements. I think would be my take. Fenella's probably more of an expert if you want a further addition.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks for the moment. I think that's helpful.
Okay, so we're moving to Fenella's report. So if there's something you want to add at the same time, Fenella, thank you, John. Fenella, let's do your report, and then if you want to answer that question, please do.
Thank you. I will take the report as read, and I will just highlight a few areas. So we are continuing to work with the system very closely around a number of projects. The primary care networks and the role of paramedics, and in particular the first contact practitioners, and how we can provide the right training and rotational opportunities to keep paramedics in an ambulance sector, but be able to enhance their knowledge and be able to bring that back in as they rotate back in. We have done some very innovative clinical pathways which have been much better for patient care, in that we've been able to take patients to the right place first time and have proven to be safe. And we're now assessing those and looking at how we can roll them out and embed them as business as usual. In particular, the frailty unit out at Ilford, where John was yesterday, being able to take those frail patients to a site where there is a multidisciplinary team able to assess them and reduce the need for them to be admitted to hospital, but put the right care packages around them. We are working very closely with the national team around how the COVID at home, which is the monitoring of pulse oximetry, using your oxygen saturations to assess whether you can be looked after in the community or whether you need further intervention, can be expanded, and that methodology be used to look after more patients in a similar way. And the two at the minute that we are looking at are patients with chronic respiratory illness and patients with diabetes. Both those groups of patients have chronic illnesses which may get acute exacerbations, so they may get worse from time to time, but they are patients who understand their disease, and taking them to hospital is not always the right thing for them. So how we can work, and we've had initial meetings around that, and around the same day emergency care. We still have a couple of hospitals where we cannot directly access the urgent treatment centre. We're working with NHS England to ensure that we can do that. The clinical audit team have continued to do the local auditing of the care pathways that we provide for our stroke, our out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and our heart attack patients to provide assurance whilst the national data is always lagging a little bit behind. But there is a change likely to come in, which is that we will be now looking at the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest data up to 30 days post-admission as opposed to 6 months, which was causing unnecessary delay and actually delaying us being able to improve care because of the length of time we were waiting. It will still be followed in shadow form because it's also important for that patient that we know what happens at 3 months and 6 months, but we will be able to report it at 30 days, which means the data will come through much more quickly. And then special care groups, we have really taken forward embedding some of the pioneer services. So the mental health car has been phenomenally successful and was shortlisted for an HSJ award. The end of life care team has been embedded as part of the service that we'll provide. And the maternity team have led a big piece of work on being able to identify high-risk maternity patients and also maternity patients who may be suffering with the symptoms of COVID, both of which have been rolled out nationally and were recognised yesterday in a visit from NHS England's chief midwife.
Should we say where our chief midwife was awarded the Gold Award for midwifery by the...
So Amanda Mansfield, who is our consultant midwife, was awarded a Gold Award by the chief midwife for NHS England, and a Gold Award is presented to an individual who's made exceptional achievements and contribution, having had a career in either nursing or midwifery. So they're not frequently awarded, but the chair and I were very pleased to be able to be present when that award was made yesterday afternoon.
And it was a very impressive visit. I mean, it's marvellous to see Amanda recognised, but also to see both the national and London midwifery team seeing and actually role-playing, giving advice down the telephone to a woman giving labour. And the chief midwife for England role-played being a patient, and it was quite challenging. At one moment, I think Fenella and I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to be a breech she's going to pretend to be, and then a shoulder dystocia. And then she looked at the call handler who looked a bit distressed, who said actually she could have dealt with that. But I think they went away really impressed with what our call handlers do and our paramedics in delivering what are often very difficult maternity cases that can be difficult in a hospital setting, such as shoulder dystocia, such as placenta abrupta. And those who've been on the board a while will know that we had a patient come and talk about her experience, and we've learned a lot. And that learning has been shared with all ambulance trusts. So it was a really impressive visit, actually, and they thoroughly enjoyed it, which is also good. So, OK, just in the system working to share that through the North West London network, discussion has been talked about how primary care might work more with GPs about hospital at home. And I have arranged with Gareth, aware of this, for John and myself to meet the chairman of Central London Community Trust to talk about what else we might do. And in terms of North East, I've been approached by Mike Bell, the chairman, who's Croydon, but he's also now at North East, and we need to build in the things you're already doing to say what else can we do. Queen's continuing to be one of our cohorting areas. So I think actually Queen's and Croydon are two of the more challenged areas that we have. So a lot of attention, but I'm just so pleased it's hit the national priorities, and we need to make sure we're right in that game. OK, thank you. So thank you, Fenella. Any other questions for Fenella? No? Really interesting and good to hear, and good to see much more focus in our board papers on clinical care between John and yourself. So let's keep doing that. And I think Karim and Mark, and Karim I think particularly challenged us initially. So hopefully, Karim, you'll think we are doing, which we should do. We spend our life delivering patient care, our frontline staff do, so focus on it, so keep challenging us. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to the Director of People and Culture report, Kim. Can't see you, Kim. Or have I gone wrong? Oh, there you are, Kim. Over to you.
Sorry.
So what we're wanting to pick up here, as if you've been on listening, is actually how we're going to get this shortfall of staff and how we're dealing with resilience. If you could, while you're doing your report, thank you.
So this report covers quite a range of work that's been undertaken by the Directorate. Obviously, we've now received all the information from the staff survey, which has given us a good indication of the feedback from our staff. That shows that we have made some progress, but we still have some areas that need attention. Last year, there were good progress being made in terms of the relationships with managers and colleagues and reducing bullying and improving the welfare and safety culture of the organisation, which have all been shown to present improvements in the staff survey this year. However, there are some areas that have been highlighted in the report that require our further attention, particularly building a safer culture, which will feed into the violence reduction work that's ongoing. Stepping up the approach with equality, diversity and inclusion, and we now have a lead member of senior staff working on that agenda with us, and also the continuing strength of our wellbeing services, which we continue to pay attention to, particularly around staff during the pandemic, but also being very mindful of long COVID and the implications that has. Our sickness levels, although have reduced substantially since the peak in January, still remain a focus of our attention. And I'll come on to the wellbeing aspects of the report very shortly. In terms of diversity, the Black Lives Matter Action Plan is included in the report to give progress against each of those actions that have been approved by the board. And this is to ensure that we are making progress in all of these areas, and that is presenting improvements in the staff feedback levels. We also have are looking at the race equality standard. That we are expecting more information to come forward on this aspect of the report. So this part of the report is to provide you with assurance that we are continuing to look at triangulating our data from across all aspects of potential sources of information to ensure that any actions put into place are appropriate and make a difference. In terms of staffing levels, as you've mentioned, we are having less people leave the organisation at the moment, which is obviously helpful, but we are mindful that staff have given their extra effort during the pandemic, and some people have delayed their plans for leaving the organisation, and so we are mindful that are looking at that for this year. We also have the primary care networks looking to source staff from our sector to support work that they're putting into place from April. We are engaging with the pilots to see how this might work, and there are some benefits arising from that. But the size of the ask from the PCNs are being considered by the organisation. We'll be able to provide you more information once that scoping has concluded, but there is a team working on that currently. In terms of staff absences, the absence level did reach its peak in January, but since then we have seen a huge decrease back to more normal levels. In terms of our staff that are off with issues arising from what we currently are calling long COVID, those types of absences are very different in nature, presenting to people on a very individual basis. So we are ensuring that our occupational health advice is being taken into account with the member of staff to ensure that we're putting into place all practical needs that they have. And the numbers of people returning to work are increasing, which is very encouraging. We have got a little delay on the mandatory training currently. That really was due to all staff being directed to the patient care in terms of the height of the pandemic, to ensure that we had sufficient resources in the system. However, we will be reviewing that process. And also we are improving on the PGRs that staff are undertaking. But People and Culture have asked for an update on that for the next meeting too. One of the big pieces of work that we've worked on is our resolution framework. Now, this is a new direction and a new process for showing a potential an early resolution to a situation that develops, both in terms of grievances, disciplinaries, and also for dignity at work cases. The resolution framework has been built with external support based on the Mercy Care learning that of a just culture, and has received input from managers, staff, and the trade union colleagues. So that resolution framework is now on the agenda for formal ratification and sign-off by the Trust Board. It will replace several of our policies, and there will be a process of education training being rolled out. The training packages are being built and also being checked by our lead for diversity and inclusion to ensure that we have eliminated as much of a bias that is possible, and to ensure that whole resolution framework goes in a speedy manner. In terms of grievances and disciplinaries, we're already seeing a reduction in these that happened towards the end of December. And this means that the average length of casework can also be improved. The longest case that we have at the moment is 161 days from beginning to end, but most cases are being resolved very quickly. And this average case length accounts for all of the types of disciplinary, some of which are fairly easy to resolve. All parties are signed up to that, and others may take a little more investigation to get to the actual issues that are being reviewed. But the level of time it takes has been decreased, but an improvement overall. When we come to health and wellbeing, huge amounts of work have been involved in these. These are all listed in the document, particularly around wellbeing seminars, which has encouraged staff to participate in a range of learning in collaboration with our colleagues from the North West London Mental Health. We have also a range of new activities that are being put into place, including the one-to-one wellbeing conversations. This arose out of the NHS People Plan, and we have 3 pilot areas to undertake those wellbeing conversations. The other area which is of note is the work for COVID vaccination programmes. Of course, this is directed across the whole of our organisation, but the initial focus was on our frontline colleagues to ensure that they were properly and adequately protected. This report shows that 76% of frontline workforce are vaccinated, but that was at the time of writing the report, and that number continues to increase. Occupational health specification is also due for review, and good progress is being made on updating that specification. The specification should be able to be ready for promoting through the procurement and tendering arrangement very shortly. While we still consider alternative options for collaboration. In terms of talent management and organisational development, we have held a all directorate meeting on new ways of working, which is feeding into a new agile working policy. And that work is ongoing. In addition, we are also reviewing the various apprenticeships that are on offer to ensure that they meet the needs of the workforce plan. There are 2 attachments to the report. One also looks at the staff survey and the areas of where LAS landed this year. Although there are some areas of progress, you can see that we are still at the tail end of the ambulance sector survey outcomes, so there is still quite a lot of work to be done in these areas, of which the Associate Director of Culture, Diversity and Inclusion is leading on this currently through a number of workshops across the organisation, and also engaging PICA to deliver thematic reports to enable local plans to be put into place. In addition, we have the RED survey indicators that have now been published. I think generally across the country, the RED survey results have been continually to be disappointing. We have made progress in terms of harassment, bullying and abuse from patients, which has seen an improvement, which is attached on Appendix 2, although the other areas of bullying, although improvements have been made, we still have work to continue to work on those. So that is the report for today. I'm happy, obviously, to take any questions or
thank you.
areas I've missed.
Thank you, Kim. So I think the first one is, where are we going to get these extra staff? I don't think you covered that.
Yeah, so we are making progress in terms of advertising for internal or UK-based paramedics. We have also looked to engage a company in Australia, New Zealand and Namibia to look at international paramedics. It's a big ask. Currently, we have 74 of the numbers required, but we will still need to do quite a substantial amount of work to increase that number. The company that we are looking to work with will be able to do local recruitment events and to encourage staff to come to the UK. We have an extensive package of support around our international paramedic recruitment, and that enables them to settle quickly into London, and also a training package to support their development ongoing.
So
we will also need to work with reviewing our education programmes to see how we can start building a more robust supply line in the UK. So I don't think the international recruitment process is a viable long-term programme, and we need to start developing that locally. So,
thank you. So one of the things we learnt at the staff meeting with me was one of the reasons we haven't had the turnover is the Australians can't actually go home right now, but they will be going home more than we had thought, is the hearsay. And their view was if they could have more than a couple of weeks off, or a month only allows them to self-isolate both ends. If we could give them 3 months off, bit of a sabbatical, and help them. How far have we got with developing that to see if that's a possibility? Where's that got to?
I'm sorry, I don't think it's something that's come through to me as yet as an option.
So I thought that's something HR were looking at. John, I did ask you to have a look at it after that meeting. Have you managed to do anything with it?
So we've started some brief conversations. There is a visa issue that we've followed up and had a specific conversation. It's to do with this 28-day period, which is your 4 weeks, and having to reintegrate them into this country. So they need a new visa when they come back. So I think it goes hand in hand with what is our career break sabbatical, or do they remain employed, but also how long they can leave the country for before they come back. So myself and King can continue picking this up, but yeah, the conversation.
Well, I think you've got a very small window of opportunity, which is closing by the day, because they will be gone, and that's why I raised it at a board level, because it was the executive. This isn't a trust issue, because it's a visa, it's Home Office or Foreign Office, or it's up there and it needs to be at that level, because we will have a mass exodus. The 1/3, I always said 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 when they first come. A third will say, I haven't done Europe yet. Well, that third can't do Europe, so they may go. A third would say, I'm going home because family, etc. And a third may say, I found a partner. Well, that's probably more difficult in COVID too, because they've been isolating if they hadn't already got one. So I think, we could assume that more are going to go, and it needs to be an urgent action. So, it needs to be, Garrett, can we put it on your agenda, please? Because this isn't a local decision. We've got to say, can we afford to do it? I think we can't afford not to do it. What does that mean? And how can we swiftly move that on? Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to suggest that we take that away as an executive team. I think it's a good idea. I think that if we need to engage on the visa issue, we have previously had avenues into Foreign Office or wherever it is to agree issues on visas, and we ought to be escalating those as quickly as possible, but we'll take it away.
I'd do it with the Department of Health as well, because this is a COVID response issue. There's extraordinary circumstances that you'll probably need their support to get. But, we need to be giving that message to people before they book their flights. Other questions for Kim, please? Sheila?
I was just going to suggest, Chair, there are a lot of strands to this workforce piece. We've got the international paramedics. I read in Kadir's report that we've got a 20% resilience built into our IUC establishment. I just feel that it would be really helpful for the board to receive an actual roadmap of, and a risk-assessed roadmap of, how are we going to find all of these resources, in what sort of time frame, what are the risks associated with it, what are the mitigations.
So I'm wondering, Sheila, if we need to, and I'd quite like to do it while we still have Jane, so we might have to have a separate couple of that. We need a full session on workforce, I think, which puts in all of these issues, the risks, what we're doing, what the plan is, what the strategy. John probably needs a little bit longer to get his feet under the table to see from his point of view of what the staffing model should be, because actually to know what manpower we need to know what operating model, we're working to. And I know Kadir, Fenella have worked on that. John, you will have a view. So what's the operating model you're recommending? And then what is the workforce need and where are we going to get it? And whether we can try and find a time with Jane, while Jane is here to do that, would be, I think, enormously helpful, so that we can get into that detail, as well as the staff survey, because it's deeply depressing that after all the work we've done, it really is still less than we would desire it to be.
Heather, do we need to do that as a full board, or do we not ask the P&C committee to do that and to assure?
Well, I think it's Jane. Jane, you got your hand up. What do you think, Jane?
We do this at every meeting.
Yes.
So we see the roadmap at every meeting. We see the workforce plan at every meeting. Kadir speaks to it, amazingly well and confidently, and has that very well identified. But I think where we miss a trick is that it's not coming here to the full board.
Yes.
And however much confidence or not I can give you through my assurance report, you're not seeing the same level of detail that we see at the People and Culture Committee. And Kadir did bring that to the board some while ago, but in fairness, you haven't had an update since then. So it's not there.
No.
It absolutely is there, but you may want to see that level of detail and the granularity that we look at the People and Culture Committee.
So I think it is, one of our big strategic risks, the workforce. So it is a board issue. I'm wondering whether we could do a non-exec briefing outside of a board to go into more detail, that those of us who aren't on People and Culture could get into, having read the materials. But I think being clear what the operating model is, which I don't think we're at, are we, Kadir?
No, thank you, Chair. So I think we've got an operating model at the moment. Obviously,
revised.
We continue to develop and iterate that. We've got an operating model. We're working to delivering the workforce plan in line with that operating model. Just for some assurance to the board, this year we end the year essentially fully established on the current establishment, and just a small number over the full establishment. And obviously, for the year ahead, we have a workforce plan to secure, in growth terms, and over 1,000 additional clinicians, and in net terms, circa 450. And then we break that down by what we will be recruiting homegrown, what we will be developing internally, what will be international. All of that's broken down, and as Jane says, P&C do get a regular update across all of those. I recognise it's an ambitious plan, and I recognise it carries risks, and some of those risks may still be to be understood and realised. But there is an incredible tight grip on it at the moment. But there's more work we need to share with that.
Let me just take a straw. Oh, Karen.
I think there was 2 points. I think one was to support, I think, Jane's point that, I think a lot of progress has been made in this in this area, and that the projections now seem a lot more solid than they've ever been. And I think the assurance at PCC is better than it's ever been. I think this goes back to what I said earlier, is that I still get the feeling that we're working on a pre-second wave operating model, or that hasn't come through yet, how our learning from the second wave has changed our operating model. And I, what I'd really like to see articulated is we're going to work within, we're not just going to want to be green on these parameters. We're going to want to work to a model where we can flex, so that if we are undersurged, not just because of a pandemic, but because of New Year's Eve or something like that, we are going to stay green. And and that's more than just workforce. That's about how we do everything. Which is why I do think it sits with operating model. It sits with Kadir and not just with PCC.
Yeah. Well, look, given that not everybody goes, Mark, you want to come in?
So just building on from Karim, certainly the after action review looked at the impact of having 50% of our 111 staff being off, either ill or isolating. And that brings us back to the resilience we have from the COVID vaccination programme. On page 7 of your reports, you look at our COVID vaccination rates almost identical to our flu vaccination rates. So 1 in 5 of our frontline staff aren't vaccinated against either flu or COVID, and 3 in 10 aren't vaccinated for our backline staff. And actually, we're just as dependent in our resilience on people who aren't frontline staff. And I don't know, I haven't seen the data to know whether 30% of staff who aren't yet vaccinated for COVID, all sitting in North East London 111 service. My guess is that it's quite high there, and that leaves us very open and vulnerable to any second surge. And unless we really develop new ways of working so that staff isolating can work from home, have the IT support, have the supervision and monitoring that enables them to do that, and the change in our workforce profile that enables that, then we'll continue to lack resilience.
So, Garrett, I think that is a very important point. I mean, all these points are important, but the bit about letting people answer calls at home and making that normalised has to be a trust strategy, and we would like to hear back from you that confirm that that is the case and it's not just random or there are reasons why we can't do it. We need to understand it. I think separately, can I ask non-execs who are not on people and culture, would you value a seminar then on the detail of the manpower planning and the issues raised? I'm seeing nods. So I think Sheila, yes. Rommel, yes. Amit, yes. I think I would, well, Jill, yes. So I think if we could set up, and it needs to have, it's a CADIR and a HR thing, but decide as execs how you want to do that. But I think we could also dip into really the staff survey a bit more as well. But, what I just, before we close it down, the sickness, I am told that the very, very sick people resulting out of COVID, that the recovery, be it neurophysiology, psychology, physical therapy, is being agreed by the regions. I've yet to see anything. I've seen a lot of well-being, psychological support, but I haven't seen anything that tells me, A, how many people we have, other than a conversation with Garrett this morning, who would be in the categories of quite severe and will need protracted rehabilitation of that expertise and where we're getting it from, because it certainly isn't Occy Health. And we've still got frontline operations at 8% sickness in that area, which is high. It's important not just to look at the bottom line, which is 6. So I think we need to hear more about that and understand it. And what are the levels? And equally, people when they're saying tired, you know, we could stop other people going sick just from exhaustion if we came up with some more flexible practices of what else they could do, get some time doing different things without reducing their pay. Mark, and then we must move on.
Just to be aware, we've got a new director of people joining us in June, and it's how we involve him in this discussion.
I agree. He should, if we can get him in early into that discussion so he doesn't come in cold, would be helpful.
He'll have experience of North East London in a different context.
Yes. Okay. And I think the point well made of understanding where are, you know, is it North East London that people are not having the injection? Where is it? Because it is a greater risk and we need to do some focused work. Okay, thank you very much. Now then, we are rather behind schedule and we do need to try and catch up, but moving on to where are we next? I've got Assurance Committee reports next on my papers. Is that what you've got? It doesn't seem to marry up with my agenda. But let's go to it. We're going to People and Culture then. Assurance report, Jane, is what's on mine.
Thank you, Heather. Not a whole lot to add over and above the discussion that we've just had. Just pull out a couple of things.
Thank you.
And Fenella may want to just talk to this very briefly. Fenella gave us an update on immunisations and our responsibility to ensure that staff are immunised in line with the Green Book requirements. And we have some significant gaps. So she alerted us to that. And members now have requested that some proposals are put together so that we understand how we can close that gap. I don't know whether you want to say any more, Fenella.
So the update since that Assurance Committee, Jane, is that Kim and I have interviewed a potential occupational health specialist to come in, as was discussed at the Audit Committee previously, to work and provide that independent advice to us around what we should be doing. We hope to have them in place within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. We also discussed the RES results, which Kim has spoken about today, but we certainly have asked for an updated action plan to come back to the next committee because we really are working off of a very, very old action plan, which is now probably 18 months old. So we have to reinvigorate that and understand what it is that we're working towards. On the staff survey, and you mentioned that earlier, Heather, we were particularly keen to understand how we were going to measure our performance against the staff survey without having to wait for next year's staff survey. So very keen for the teams to bring us back the metrics, if you like, that they are going to use to measure how we are performing against those action plans that have been put in place. So we await seeing that. And we've had the discussion on workforce planning. And I think for me, the critical thing that I want to see now in place is who that recruitment partner is, and for that to actually now be taking effect, because we are running out of time.
Thank you, Jane. That's really important to note. Okay, so Mark, have we gotten a quality assurance report from you?
We had, Heather, but you jumped over it, but that's
Sorry,
fine.
I know. So I'm just having a bit of difficulty with where my papers are at, because I'm not on the system, I'm on papers, it wasn't there. So shall we have your quality report now? Thank you.
I'll take it largely as read. Two things to highlight. One was the discussion we've just had around vaccination.
Yeah.
The other was that we had a presentation from the police who support us, particularly in our pharmacy and the work with pharmacy, and in helping with prosecutions. We had a very useful, deep discussion. One of the things that was highlighted is that their team have been dramatically cut so that the amount of support they're able to give us is much less. And I've agreed that I will write a letter to the police authority expressing our concern because there's a large amount of work to do. And the misuse of drugs is potentially a major problem for us. The new pharmacy workshops and facilities will lessen that to a large extent, but it's still a large piece of work that we need to look at. And so just to inform the board, I'll be writing expressing our concern for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and apologies for my oversight. Turning to Finance and Investment Committee that Amit is now chairing as an interim chair, and did very well. So Amit, your first report on our...
Should I do my executive director report first?
Well, it's how I've got the papers actually, so
I think it might be helpful context.
Okay, well, let me advise everybody, we're ending at 12 and we're now rather behind, and there's some important things, so we need to make sure we focus on what we focus on.
Yes.
Okay, so Lorraine's report and then Amit.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the Executive Director report as read. It references the Month 10 position, which is in the Integrated Performance Report. But there are some important changes in both the allocations for revenue and for capital that I want to draw the Board's attention to, which I'll do. I'll also pick up the Month 11 report, which is down further on the agenda under item 9.12 as part of this update. So just to remind the board that the last meeting, our forecast was for a potential swing due to the second wave of COVID and a potential deficit of 15 million. You'll see in the Month 10 position that through a combination of the impact of lockdown activity, which allowed us to stand down some of the resilience, but also some successful working with the system to access contingency, that risk was brought back within the original plan. However, what you'll note for Month 10 is that our 2.3 million
Lorraine, I'm sorry, you're going to have to keep your voice up. It's coming and going a bit.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Is that better? Sorry. So just to note that the 2.3 million surplus plan has moved for two items which are agreed with the commissioners. These are two allowable changes that reflect some of the national sort of settlements and support for ensuring that we close our accounts and align together. So those two items, to pick up Mark's earlier point, one is the increase in the annual leave that we are expecting our staff to need to take. to provide for that. So the 2.3 million has moved out for an allowable missed the control total of 3.6 million for the annual leave. And then there's a further move in relation to a national settlement of a dispute around overtime, annual leave on overtime payments, which called the Flowers case. And that settlement has resulted in a further change of 2.6 million. So our headline forecast deficit now is 3.7 million, but that is entirely consistent with the 2.3 million plan, and just takes account of these national settlements. The other thing that I just wanted to pick up was the capital forecast. So you'll note that our original CRL was 41.3. That has actually now increased because we've received some PDC funding from NHS Digital to support personal devices, our iPads, which is good because it will allow us to redeploy some of the capital that we will have put aside for the replacement of those programs. So that has now moved out to 45.6 million. At month 11, we are forecasting the 2 million underspend against the forecast. And I think it's fair to say that this is one of the most challenging parts of our this year's delivery. For very good reason. A lot of the works are back-ended, and in particular, quite a large amount relates to estate building. We've seen the excellent developments in terms of training and the move of Bow Centre. The issue that we have is that there's a number of these that rely on surveyors' valuations which are being carried out now. So there will be some element of estimate and potential movement in that. But at the moment, we have done the work. We are forecasting to be on track with that 2 million underspend. But as I say, there is some residual risk around the valuation. I've covered the financial plan under the sector.
Pardon?
I also noted the financial plan update, but I'll cover that as a specific item again.
Okay, so should we let's do Amit's report and then the audit report for that section before we move on then. So Amit from Finance and Investment.
Thanks, Heather. There were actually two meetings, so I'll just cover them off briefly. The meeting of the Finance Committee on the 19th of February. The only matter for escalation that's still relevant is the committee approved the award of the contract for construction work on the training facility, which is one of the large capital projects that Lorraine just referred to. I think the other matters for escalation have been superseded by the finance update that Lorraine just gave us. So moving on to the committee meeting that we had on the 23rd of March, there were a few matters for escalation. So we received a copy of the finance plan that's on the agenda for later on this board. As Garrett and Lorraine have mentioned, it's a plan of two halves. So we have plans for the next 6 months and budgets that we recommend for board approval. And then the second half of the year will have to be revisited when we when we have progressed further our discussions with commissioners. As part of that, the committee recommended that cost improvement plans be started immediately rather than waiting for the second half of the year. And I think that had the support of Garrett and Lorraine and Kadir, which was great. Other things to note, the Make Ready business case, which is a very large retender, came to the Logistics and Infrastructure Committee and then to FIC. A very good case. We complimented the team on what they'd done and recommended it to the Trust Board for approval. And then the final thing, there's a change request to the Hub 1 business case. Now that's the first site for our ambulance operations modernisation programme. We had a discussion of this at FIC. The capital requirement has changed and gone up, and the revenue requirement has gone down for this. There's still some details that need to be worked out on the specification for that new ambulance hub. So the recommendation of the committee was that we approve the overall financial envelope for and change request the overall financial envelope for Hub 1 business case, but that the board see the finalised specification for Hub 1 before, I guess, ground is broken, as it were. So those are the kind of matters for escalation. Just one other point was that there was another change request for the medicines packing unit where the capital costs had gone up. It was approved by the Finance Committee. It didn't need to come to board. But I think in the context of a very large capital programme, in the context of the changes to the Hub 1 and business case of the medicines packing unit, I think there was just a recognition and awareness that we need to make sure as an organisation we have the right subject matter experts and access to the right experts when we are doing, when we're undertaking such a ambitious capital programme. So I think Andrew Goodman, Director of Strategic Assets and Property, said that he was going to look into making sure we had the right panel of experts available to advise us on future plans. And I think the committee endorsed that and thought that was a very good idea.
Thank you, Amit. Do we want to go straight on to Robin's report, or did you want to do the financial plan going forward, Lorraine, before? What is better?
I'm happy to take the financial plan.
Should we take the financial plan and then go to the audit report? Yep, fine. Okay, the financial plan as succinctly as you can, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the purpose of this paper then is to present for approval the first 6 months financial plan, which is set out as the statement of commensurate income, our balance sheet and cash flow. And that will allow us to set budgets from the 1st of April. At the time of the consideration of this plan, we hadn't had the benefit of the national planning guidance. The paper sets out the key assumptions. We've taken a range of national assumptions and system level assumptions for setting the first year. What I can say, now that we've had the benefit of the planning guidance, which was published on the 25th of March, is that the assumptions in the first half are broadly in line with the planning guidance. So I can still recommend the approval for this envelope. The envelope that we're proposing for the income plan for the first 6 months is just under 268 million for the first 6 months. The plan is for a break even, and what this will do is allow the trust then to effectively carry on with the rollover expenditure plans that we have had in 2021. Between now that we've got the planning guidance, the trust will work with North West London System to complete the final Hub 1 plan. There will be a return required by the early June to confirm this. But clearly, this will be more of the same of picking up the priorities for NHS 111 being the primary route to access urgent care, and the ED avoidance, which has been part of our ongoing expenditure commitments. The only other thing to say is that for the purposes of this plan, I'm asking for recommendation of just the internally generated capital requirement. So as at now, we still have to go through a process to identify external sources of capital. There is going to be a process for that, but I think the plan is to recommend a capital plan of 16.3 million, which is covered by our internally generated resources, and that's largely the roll forward of commitments that we made in this financial year. I think those are the key elements of the financial plan. Very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Okay, questions for Lorraine. Jill.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Lorraine. I just wondered if you could just explain a little bit about the relationship between how much capital we've got to spend for the remainder of this year and the budget for next year. And how much is there an independence between the two things? Is there a risk that if we don't spend it in the remaining part of this year, that we're going to overspend next year significantly? I'm not clear on how that works through in the dependencies. It'd just be useful to understand that.
Yes, so it's just worth just reminding the board that for this year we stood up a total programme of 60 million. We agreed with North West London that we would proceed at risk because there was a significant amount of resilience spending to ensure that we captured some of the key impact of COVID, necessitating some of the closures of our stations and keeping those sort of COVID compliant. The key is that when we then finally got confirmation of all of the central funding, so remember there were a number of bids sent through each system. Not all of the COVID funding came through for this financial year. So that is why we have ended up with a plan of just over 41 million and then increased by the iPad PDC. So effectively, the 20 million, there has been some slippage that's already been sort of predicated in this year's sort of forecast. And so when we look at the sort of the build-up of the projects, so for example, the Hub 1 and the second part of the training sort of consolidation, those are now falling into 21-22. So I think the impact of the plan that I'm presenting for approval, I think is fully covered. And I think that there is these are new projects that we have sufficient their assurance in terms of their stage of qualification, that those will be those are commencing for next year. So I think that they are the projects that we're proposing for 21-22 are independent of the completion of this plan for 2021.
Any more questions for Lorraine? Sheila.
Lorraine, thank you. Just on page 14 of the plan, it references the cost pressures and the expectation that those would be validated by the end of March. And particularly there was 9 million in fleet and logistics and 2 million in education and training. Can you confirm that this plan has validated those cost pressures and they're included in the plan?
So we're still working through that. So I think that will be a focus for the second half plan. So there are a number of the cost pressures. There's still a conversation with the system to confirm the overall envelope, and we have factored those into. So we have assurance on the first half of the year because we've got the rollover funding, but I think there's an element still to confirm those that fall into the second half of the year.
So can we
that will be
clarify that, Lorraine? So there is no. We've asked for a CIP in the first half of the year, but you're saying that actually the rollover money will allow us to break even in the first half of the year. But when we last spoke, there was a 27, I think, million gap. And the NHS London, North West London papers talk about a 2% saving that's going to be mandatory without our other requirements.
I can confirm the plan does, so it factors in cost improvement that will meet that.
But we haven't identified any.
It is. We have identified it. The issue is so within. If you look on the pages, the assumption is that we have a CIP of 9 million for the whole year. Finance Investment Committee have asked us to bring that forward. So I think that is the minimum that we will be targeting for 2022.
I suppose building on Sheila's point, the training ones and the ones that you've mentioned for the second half of the year, which I think said would be confirmed by 30th, and you're saying still work in progress. I understand that.
Yeah.
But are they not linked to the development we're doing of bringing the training centres together? So is there a timing element of whether it's achievable, and are they whole year or part year?
I'll have to come back and confirm.
And I think we need to be assured that the exec are on top of the CIPs. You know, we cannot end the year with a deficit of any kind, because we know that the following year is going to be tricky nationally.
Yes, and I mean, I think what I can assure the board is that we have there is a very well worked up set of plans coming out of COVID. The issue is about ensuring that we now put these into the budget setting process, and that does require a sort of a level of engagement which we've not been able to complete whilst we've been in the midst of the surge. But I think we are in a better place than previous years, because we have now got some benefit of some very well formulated plans. But we now need to take those into the budget setting process, which we will be doing between now and the completion of the plan that will go into the system at the beginning of June.
So I think a general comment is one I had with Garrett. I think that we can no longer excuse COVID. We are through that peak. We might get another peak, but we have to now make sure we deliver on all the things that we said we would. We can't say, oh, because of COVID, we're not doing. But are people happy to approve the draft report financial plan for the first half of the year? Yes. With, I think, I would just flag reservation of wanting to see those CIPs. Yes? Okay, nobody saying otherwise? Okay, thank you, Lorraine. That takes us to Rommel, the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Chair. So I just brought a few points. I think in the context of the discussion we've just had, which talks about accelerated transformation, but also potential ongoing pandemic uncertainty, the Audit Committee did some reflecting on the risk framework and the board assurance framework as well. And I think that there's some important work going on in Simon's team and with James and others on assurance mapping, which we'd like to conclude on. And I think to see the results of that in the context of our 3 lines of defense and how effective and how good and strong it is, and therefore resilient to cope with whatever might hit us in the future. So that is something we're recommending to the board, and we'll bring that back in due course. And I would suggest that anything that comes out of that, we tie into later governance changes that you talked about, Heather, as the chair. So that would be one matter for board to consider. Other matters just to bring out, which were positives. There was a significant assurance internal audit review on the BAF, so things are working very well in that area, and also on our expenditure in terms of COVID. So the internal auditors did take a look at that, and it's good to see that Lorraine and the team have put in some good controls there. So that's reassuring. We did go back and look at we had an audit committee part B back in September following the For All Our Wellbeing issues. We just wanted to make sure that actions were being followed up. And there has been comprehensive work done, but there are a couple of matters outstanding. There's still some matters, Kim, which I can talk to you offline. And I think somebody in Kadir's team is actually picking up the mantle to go around and make sure these all get addressed. Some HR matters that need to be addressed. And secondly, the issue of the vaccination risk, which Mark and Jane have all picked up. And then the final point, just to bring out, which references your earlier remarks, Chair, in the context of, and I wanted to kind of bring it out here in this particular session, in the context of the integrated RUC strategy and 111 being a fundamental pillar of that, what I think we've witnessed is a growth in 111 capacity where we've been putting in more resource, particularly at the behest of ICS demand. But also this has been exacerbated by COVID. And we've seen actually the Think 111 national programs, etc. So I think this is driving us to take a view and take a sit back, actually, and just look at the finances, the processes, and the controls around our whole 111 service. And that is something I'll pick up with Kadir, as you suggested, as part of a scoping review.
Good.
And maybe bring that back to the board.
Okay, and I think we need to be quite timely in that if we could be, Rommel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that was it.
No, thank you very much. Okay, any questions for Rommel? No, thank you. Right, Sheila, shall we do your two reports, Logistics and Infrastructure Committee and then the D999?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. So a number of points have already been mentioned in other updates, so I'll just cover topics that haven't been mentioned already. So firstly, just on benefits and benefits realisation, we discussed the work that Lorraine and Kadir are doing to really understand benefits and attribute benefits based on all the various capital projects that are ongoing. We did recommend that it would be very beneficial to build an integrated report that the Finance and Infrastructure Committee could receive so that we could see holistically how all the benefits are being tracked, and that would mitigate the risk of any sort of duplication or failure perhaps to identify benefits to particular activity sets. So I know, Lorraine, you were going to take that forward as an action item for FIC. The other topic we discussed, which hasn't been referenced already, was the Next Generation Ambulance Programme. And we received an update on that now, reminding everybody that is building this new specification for a zero emissions, lightweight, more accessible and of course digitally enabled ambulance. This is in collaboration with NHS and NHSI are actually driving the procurement process. We discussed, it's quite an ambitious set of targets and milestones that have been outlined. So one of the things we inquired into is we obviously have a requirement to purchase the first set of these new ambulances in the summer of 22, FY22. So we just wanted to inquire into if we miss that milestone, do we have a plan B? And we believe we do have a plan B. However, it's not the most beneficial plan B for us. Whilst it meets the ULEZ, the ultra low emission standards, it doesn't actually give us all of the new requirements. So we would like to keep a watching brief on this programme, obviously, and make sure we understand the risks and the mitigations associated with it. So that will come back to the next link. Next point I'd call out, which Kadir mentioned in his report, but I'd just like to amplify points around cyber and data assets. There has been some very good progress in driving the technical resilience required for cyber and keeping us aligned with the data protection toolkit. However, we did discuss the need for greater cultural awareness of cyber across the trust, so trust-wide. And we asked the exec, so Lorraine and Kadir, to take that forward, to include in it a discussion with the executive on our data assets, the ownership of our data assets. So as we put all these technical controls in place, do we have the right processes and procedures and ownership of our data assets to make sure we remain compliant? So Lorraine and Kadir took that away. And then finally, I'd just like to call out that we were very impressed with the progress that's been made in driving compliance within estates and fleet. And Andrew Goodman came and gave a very good report on compliance and the work he's doing. He also gave a report on the work he's leading to look at improving morale and culture and also leadership within the three functional areas. And we recommended that he take that report to the PCC, the People and Culture Committee, because we think there's an opportunity for PCC to be cited on it, but also to provide additional support to Andrew. So hopefully, Jane, that can be brought forward to your committee. So that's my update on the Logistics and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you.
And then just moving on to the D999 programme, as you heard already, and I'm very pleased with The committee is very pleased with the progress made to date on driving adoption for our electronic patient care record. As of Sunday, we were at 80% adoption, which exceeds what was in my report, which was of March the 11th. So we're really driving forward, and I'd like to commend the team, particularly commend Stuart Crichton, Peter Rhodes and Giles Gladen, and their teams who've been driving this adoption forward. My report also mentions, and it was mentioned by Kadir, but I'll just amplify it again, that there are 2 releases coming up. This first release that is due shortly will include the integration and the onboarding of London-Air Ambulance, and as mentioned already, the integration of the NHS number, which will obviously mean that we have less of this manual data entry, which will be fantastic for our crews. And then release 3 will come when it's fully integrated with the new computer-aided dispatch system, which will also pre-populate incident data and again reducing manual data entry, and of course will include a full digital safeguarding referral process. So we're really delighted with the progress to date and more to come. And then on the computer-aided dispatch system, unsurprisingly, that project has been delayed due to the recent COVID wave. So we're now looking at an assumption of a November go-live. Date will be reviewed. We'll have 2 checkpoints, one in June and one in September. And of course, we will only proceed if we have successfully gone through the gates and comfortable that we've got the full integration of the code. It's working end-to-end across all the different systems. And of course, we've got it tested under low conditions. And by that, I mean that we can manage this new system in a condition where, for example, New Year's Day, where we have increased volume. So those will be very important checks and balances we'll build in before we would be comfortable to proceed with the go-live in November. And then my final point is just to reference that we had the second report from PwC. Just as a reminder, PwC are providing independent reviews and assurance around the status of the D99 programme, given its complexity and its importance to the Trust. I'm pleased to say that the second report concluded that the programme is progressing very well and that there's a very robust governance in place. It did point out 3 areas of attention. One is in our test planning, the second one is in our change and adoption planning, and the third is in our engagement and continuous engagement with our supplier. I'm pleased to note that all of those action items are being addressed, and we continuously receive updates and a watching brief on all 3. And finally, as a sort of an added opportunity, the PwC report did highlight that or recommend that the Trust look at building an integrated change plan. So we have a number of programs ongoing, and their view was that it would be very helpful to have an integrated plan that we could review so we could understand the dependencies between all of these different programs and help us to have a very good understanding of the change program or the change roadmap ahead. So that concludes my update on D999.
It's really helpful, thank you, and good news. Can I just ask, how long is the implementation period for the CAD?
So when you say implementation period, do you mean
when
from
you
the
go
time
live, when you start to go live, how long does it take?
So that's part of the work that we need to look at, is whether or not it's going to be a switch over immediately, or whether there will be some sort of parallel running that we might need to do between old CAD and new CAD. But my expectation is it's likely to be a switch over immediately. So there isn't going to be a ramp up like we've had with the EPCR adoption, because you switch it on and then you're using the new CAD system immediately.
Because November is getting preciously close to flu, which we didn't have this year, and more COVID, and we might be on yet more, and then Christmas. So I'm just slightly concerned that we've got to be safe, but we're not going to have an easy winter by any imagination.
We did discuss that, and we discussed also obviously the potential implications of a third wave, etc. So hence the reason why we asked that we want to see the reports in June, the reports in September. Yes. So my expectation is that there will be a decision made as to whether or not November is a date that we want to go live. But for now, we want to push forward because there's a lot of good work that's taking place, and we'd like to keep the momentum going.
So, obviously there's no chance of it being earlier than November is what I was wondering.
I think it's highly unlikely at
Okay.
this point. Yeah.
Let's hope we can do it by November then. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Sheila? So, Rommel, was that you or no?
I was just very quickly, I just wanted to reinforce, I think, what Sheila said.
Yes.
I think the need for integrated change plan across the portfolio of change is something we should really look at.
Yes.
And maybe PCC could take a look at it with Jane's support in the first instance, and then the board in the round.
I think that would be extremely important, thank you, and good to have had the Price Waterhouse confirmation of the governance around it, so that was really good, well done, thank you to the team and Sheila obviously. Right, so what we haven't discussed, have we done month 11? Yes, we have, Lorraine's done month 11, but we haven't done the approach to the annual report and accounts. Is that you, Lorraine?
That's
No?
been removed. It's not on our agenda.
It's not on. It's on the agenda I've got, which is a bit tricky. And the quality account priorities has been removed. So the next thing I have got on this agenda is the resolution framework on number 11. Does that coincide with what everybody else has? It gets a bit tricky when you're working to something different, when you're chairing in a different place. Okay, thank you very much. So, Kim, are you presenting this?
Yes, thank you. So the resolution framework has had quite a thorough work, building on the arrangements that were shared from Merseycare NHS Foundation Trust of their Just and Learning culture. This also builds on the letter that was received from Baroness Harding to request all organisations review their disciplinary approaches following a very tragic incident that happened with an NHS worker. The programme of reviewing this policy, or actually initiating a brand new policy and arrangements, started with discussions with our trade union colleagues, with managers, with staff, and really crafting this with some support as well from an external company that is very proficient in early resolution. So this framework is now being presented to you. It has been through People and Culture, it's been through the Executive Committee as well, and has received their endorsement. It mirrors the values and behaviours of an organisation to really have those adult-to-adult conversations to resolve at the earliest point workforce and workplace issues. And it is designed that arising out of those discussions that we end up with a constructive and long-lasting resolution of an outcome. And that both parties feel that they have been listened to and heard and have come up with an outcome that is a good outcome for all parties. It should reduce the number of formal disciplinary grievance cases, and also because of an early resolution process, it means that the stress and anxiety on our staff will also be reduced. So this document is here to replace the grievance, disciplinary and dignity at work policies, which are currently all separate policies. This really brings it into a brand new arrangement. There will be formal training that attaches with all of this. This type of approach is used in other organisations and has a good outcome. It does require training of our managers and also our staff representatives to ensure that they are supporting staff through this process with civility, dignity and respect at all levels. There will be an occasion when an early resolution either is not supported as an appropriate place, So there is a process within the resolution framework for the more traditional and thorough investigation, if that should be needed, to really understand what the issues are. However, the principles of a resolution and the values and behaviours, as we mentioned previously, will still remain. There is a change to the process in that the appeals hearings, should they come around from the formal process, will be conducted in-house, and staff executive colleagues will be trained in the delivery of that process. Again, that's very well supported by all those that have been party to designing this resolution framework. What we intend to do is to start some training in April, some scoping of the pathway of training has already been established, and it's going through a series of checks to make sure that it's sufficient, and briefings of managers, staff will be also established as a programme of informing and communicating the new arrangements, but also intend to write to all those that are currently have an outstanding grievance or disciplinary or dignity at work, to ask them if they wish to transfer from their current policy arrangements onto this new resolution framework. So the policy is here, the framework is here for your support, and happy to answer any questions.
You're asking us to approve it, though, are you?
Yes, please.
Right. Okay. Questions for Kim? Amit.
Thank you, Chair. Really good to see this coming to the board for approval, Kim. One question, you talked about staff representatives, and it refers to resolution advocates within the paper. I'm assuming those are the same thing, and if they are, the Trust has previously trained a series of staff representatives in dignity at work, facilitation, etc. Will you be looking to build on that cadre as part of these resolution advocates? Have we reached out to them to express interest?
Definitely. I mean, we want to encourage as many people to remain in the system who've already got a lot of experience in this type of work, and so yes, definitely we want to retrain those in this new framework. Thank you.
I wondered if Jane wanted to comment. Sorry, Jill first. Then I'd say Jane, as Chair of People and Culture, might want to comment. Jill, your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Heather. Yeah, thanks, Kim. I mean, very supportive, and it's a really important initiative. I noticed that you've got a little bit about the monitoring of it as you're implementing this. I think it would just be useful to kind of get any feedback about how well this is received, and if it helps manage the situation as we go forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we've done is also taken some cases and sort of sense checked them against the new framework to make sure that it doesn't produce spiritualist type of outcomes, that it does actually meet what we're requiring it to do, which is always helpful. We can use that throughout the training as well. We will be monitoring the outcomes as we go through to ensure that it is meeting what we intended it to do. And we will also be ensuring that we work with both staff representatives and managers to iron out any development issues that also might arise from this. Be happy then to, as we currently provide some details in the People and Culture reports, and then on to the board, we can refine those dashboards to reflect the work that's been undertaken.
Okay, thank you. Jane, do you want to comment?
Thank you. Yeah, very, very supportive of this. I think I've become a bit word blind to the number of iterations that Kim and I have seen throughout the process. But Jason and the team have done an absolutely fabulous job of socialising this and pulling it together. The committee, the People and Culture Committee, were privy to Jason's implementation plan at the last committee, so he outlined that to us. And that's going to be a very full plan, as Kim says, of training people and getting people up to speed, not just publishing this policy. So there's still a lot of work to do. It's been a long journey to get here, but I commend it to you. I think it is the right way to go. And now we just need to see the proof of the pudding, if you like, is in the eating as we actually implement this and roll it out.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. It is good to see and represents a way forward. Currently, non-execs sit on appeals, which isn't normal unless they're appeals against dismissal. But I notice you haven't differentiated the level of people. So supposing there is an issue at director level, are you still assuming they go through the same process? I've now got something on the screen that I can't see most people, but is there now no longer a role? Are you recommending that there's no longer a role for non-execs? And my question is, shouldn't there be one against dismissal or grievances that haven't been resolved at exec level? Shouldn't there be a last level for non-execs, but only at that level? And can you confirm that nobody will be engaged in this process until they've been trained? And then my last question is, when you shared the data with us of the average length of time, as you evidenced, it hides a multiple of sin. So one person, 166 days, which is more than a third of a year. I hope that in writing to people and saying, would you like to go through this process, it doesn't delay the outcome for people like that. Because that, it is a disgrace that we have, and I know you've inherited it, Kim, but it is a disgrace that we have people waiting any longer than a month for things to be resolved, let alone a third of a year. And as you know, we've just dealt with somebody who'd been suspended for a whole year. So can you confirm we're not going to delay things for those types of people?
Yes, okay, thank you. So regarding appeals and the role of a NED on those appeals, the arrangements will be that they will be covered by an executive director level rather than by a non-executive director. This retains it in the organisation, but also ensures that as we're providing you with assurance, you're not also involved in that level. I'm now dealing with drilling
in my ears, so could you really almost shout? I'm sorry. I've got a screen thing that I now can't see. I can see you, Kim, but I can't see most people. Let's go on. Keep going.
Yeah, so the appeals will be dealt with by a non-executive director, will be dealt with by an executive director, not a non-executive director. And this is to ensure that the role of the organisation to provide you then with that level of assurance means that you're not also involved in that level of process, to give you that.
But aren't we supposed to be involved before anything goes to an industrial tribunal? There's meant to be a non-exec level for those sort of issues, I thought.
The reason why we're including it as an exec is so that if it goes to an appeal, goes to an employment tribunal, then we do have a member of.
But what if it's an exec? What if it's a director level person? Surely it isn't right for their same level people.
No, I think you're right. If it's an exec issue, then the NED role is absolutely incredibly important.
So that isn't in this document.
If we haven't made that part clear, then I will get that.
I don't think that's clear from my reading of it. Okay, thank you.
That's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but clearly you're right. We don't want NEDs doing them all. If it's executive level, we need to have that.
Director level, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
In terms of training, absolutely, everybody should be involved in the process, must be trained. Those sitting on panels or in meetings definitely need to be trained to understand their range of options that are available to them. And we don't expect there to be delays in the process. I know that we are reporting a couple of cases where currently they have taken a long time. identified an error in our reporting process, which we need to address. We also keep cases open in case there might be an appeal later on. So actually, I think we are over-reporting some of the data, and we need to be very clear about the data that needs and the issues that are needing to be captured and reported upon, so that we understand those better. I think we have an electronic system at the moment which doesn't needs tweaking, because it's not currently covering some of these issues, and also it's resulting in a manual check that's needing to be undertaken as well to ensure the effective close down of cases. Otherwise, the numbers just keep rolling forward. So the team are on that now. So hopefully the data reporting in the future will be more robust.
That's good. Thank you. Just lastly, it just made me remember that when people feel stressed because of these issues, they go off. Off sick. Can I ask? I have nothing on screen, so can I ask? Are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Right. I can't see anybody at all right now. So, when people go off sick because of stress, because of the situation, how do we deal with that? Is that covered in this document?
Well, there is a range of welfare checks that are required to be undertaken to ensure that members of staff are kept up to date, are kept informed, and are provided with the support should they feel stressed. Part of the stress is because the issue isn't resolved.
No, sorry, I meant if they are formally off sick, is it the case that this document allows them to come in if they feel fit to have a meeting, or does it have to wait until they are declared fit to continue with the resolution? And does that document cover it?
Yes, so the document does. They should be enabled to come into work if they feel that they are sufficiently capable of proceeding with a resolution.
But the question is, do you feel the document covers that?
If you feel it isn't, then we can certainly make sure that's covered in the training.
Yeah, in the training, probably very important to do. Okay, thank you. So I have restricted viewing. Does anybody else want to, would you speak if you just say you want to say something on this? Anybody want to add anything? Ask Kim anything? Okay, no. Right, is the board content to approve this resolution framework? And I need you to speak because I can't see anybody really.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No, great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Kim. Well, we look forward to seeing a big reduction in disciplinaries and grievances going on a long time, facilitated by this process. Thank you. Okay, now we have the board assurance framework, which I am assured that executive and non-executive director, you're back, hello, non-exec and executive directors filled in. Sorry.
I can pick this up, Heather, in Simon's absence.
Thank you.
So board assurance framework is largely as tabled.
Yeah.
Apologies that the cover paper appears to be the cover paper from the executive committee meeting rather than one directly attributed to the board. So if nothing else, that gives you the assurance that it's been through the executive committee.
Sorry, it's a different
the only
item.
proposals here really are to reduce the levels of COVID-related risk. We obviously spoke in January about looking to migrate our sort of COVID-specific risks into business as usual. That piece of work is ongoing at the moment, so this is still presented in the form of BAFRIS 61 in terms of the sub-risks spread across the topic areas of the various committees, most of which are reporting a lowering of risk commensurate where we are now with the COVID cycle, but there are no other changes proposed by the executive to the other strategic risks on the BAF.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Garrett on the BAF?
Nothing other than just to support what Garrett said and just to underline that we reviewed the BAF risks associated with Logistics and Infrastructure Committee, we discussed whether we should change any of the ratings, and we concluded that after we've concluded the implementation of CAD and all the cyber resilience, that the scores will remain as they are.
Okay, sounds wise. Rommel?
Nothing specific on the BAF, but just a couple of questions, I guess, clarifying. On the health and safety and well-being staff risk, which I think the exec have noted at 12, I was just wondering whether that should be higher. So that's my first question. Second question, on the corporate risks, there's a medical equipment issue where the risks, it's rated at 16. And I just wonder, maybe Fenella might want to say something on that.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
Fenella?
Yes, thank you. So Kadir and I are just working through a report which has been done into the medical devices to understand the improvements that have been recommended. It sits under health and safety, so we're picking it up currently in Simon's absence. And we will then review both the risk and bring forward through the executive team and then the audit committee an action plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we approve of the BAF staying as it is and work that the exec have done. So no significant change there. Yes? Garrett? Fine. Okay, thank you. Are there any matters for any other business? No. We have additional reports, Corporate Risk Register, Quality Report and the Register of the Field to note. Can I confirm people have noted those? Yeah. So just to summarise then today, I think we've looked back at what was the busiest period of our time under the COVID in the January period and commend the team for managing to get Category 1, but note Category 2 means that we do need to build resilience, and we spent some time talking about both in manpower and systems, how we build that resilience going forward to ensure and that we have assurance that we've looked through quality and through John and Fenella at the risks of incidents that occurred due to delays. We spent some time on the People and Culture report, again looking at our resilience and the manpower planning and the issues raised there, and also the wellbeing support for staff. We have approved the budget for the first half year, noting that we have had the operational planning guidelines, and admittedly they only came out on, I think, Thursday night, maybe Friday morning, and noting the 6 priorities. Pleased to see that NHS 111 is in there and the work with primary care and alternative pathways. And in looking at our resilience, we heard from Fenella on the work that she's been doing nationally and we continue to do of hospital at home and alternate new pathways that we need to get adopted and expanded across the whole sector. We have approved a resolution framework which we are optimistic will help us with much better solutions to grievances and disciplinaries in an early way, but note that we still have a long way to go with those, and that in looking at the staff survey we look forward to receiving the action plans and hearing progress of those being implemented. I think that is a summary of where we've got to. Is there anything, how do people feel the meeting went? I feel not working to the right agenda wasn't very helpful from my perspective, and I apologise. Does anybody else want to give any feedback on the meeting that we've had to date so far? That's a resounding silent. Okay. Do people feel they had the opportunity to challenge and question the executive on anything? Yes, I've got a few nods.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything that I've missed in the summary that people want to add? No.
Very efficient, Heather, considering the volume of things we had to get through.
It was tricky this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you. So this brings us to the closure of the meeting in public and excludes members of the press and public members, and we will close before we have our private meeting to discuss matters reserved for the board that are of either a commercial or personal nature. So thank you very much. Before, though, the board go, could you just wait a second? I just want to say a couple of things. Thank you very much. So if we could...